Hey, cool. This is Michael Spisak, and this is my final audio of the semester. It's kind of crazy, but yes, it's my final for my final audio for your final. So, without further ado, I'm going to read off with my outline as I usually do. So, you had me do question number 1 and question number 2. So, I'll start with question number 1. In light of all the Kid Nation episodes, so A is taking pride in carrying out one's responsibilities as a part of the Bonanza community. The moment I read that, the first person that popped into my mind was, of course, Sophia. Or I say of course because it's kind of a natural to me. Beginning as a cook and then later on kind of becoming the sheriff and being the cook before there were the allocation of districts. The way that she felt so good about that and kind of personally put herself in charge of that really showed me that she had that drive to be the person in responsibility, but the part that hones in on taking pride in carrying out one's responsibilities, I'll talk about the cook first. When people were thanking her in the lunch hall, I remember there was like one little like video segment where she was like, that means the world to her, and that really shows me that she was taking pride in her hard work. And moving later down in the season, when she was the sheriff, when she was walking around the town, and she was like, you guys are doing a really great job, because that was when the arcade couldn't be open until all of the other jobs were taken care of. She was like going around inspecting while all the other council members were out at the like Indian hut, TP, not hut. She was like, you guys did a really great job. I'm really proud of you. And they were like, thanks so much. And she like stood up on top and she was like, you guys can go to the arcade, like be free. And they were like, all the kids were excited they can go to the arcade. Like she seemed as if, and there was a little segment where she was like talking about the process of going through and seeing how great everybody had done with their jobs, that she saw how much of an influence she could have. And that showed me that she really took pride in making that difference of showing them the responsibility aspect before they could take care of the reward, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. The second part is how it speaks to your understanding of how children understand more adult topics, or how it is on a larger scale outside of Bonanza City. Sophia speaks to my understanding of how children understand the idea of responsibility and how important it is. Even at the beginning of the series, she didn't head up the cooking. She knows that if she didn't head up the cooking, there would have been no food for the younger kids, or potentially anyone at all, or at least they wouldn't have really learned to make the food without her sparking that. And even though she held that heavy burden, she knew that if she was in charge, something would get done, which shows she understands that someone being in that responsibility is important. And it kind of goes into your classroom. Anne does teacher assistant and things like that, and it puts the responsibility on top of the student. And even I've used it where I've conducted a play with my second graders, and I was like, it's your responsibility to learn your lines. And it shows all of that, including Sophia, shows me that they take responsibility really seriously, and they definitely don't take it lightly. That's for sure, and it's great to see that as a teacher. B was effectively electing / campaigning and performing as a desirable leader on council. Zach, hands down, one of the most memorable moments of the entire show is Zach's election speech. And even before that, his drive to become a council member, when the time came for the first round of elections began, it was very clear that he wanted the position, and he took the campaign seriously in order to usurp Taylor. I probably would have done the same thing because of how Taylor was acting, but he was very humble when he won. He was very all his decisions were based off of the town, not necessarily him wanting to be the council, because I'm pretty sure at that time the council had said that, or it was kind of like known that the council couldn't get a star, so it wasn't even that for him. It was he wanted to be put into a leadership position to better the outlook on his district, the yellow district. He's like, Taylor's not setting an example, I want to set the example, and that's why he did that. And I wrote down on this outline that Zach speaks to my understanding of how children understand an election and how to write a persuasive speech. Because Zach employs a variety of strategies in his speech that makes it extremely powerful and convincing. Using Taylor's words against her when he was like, "I am sure we have all heard the words, deal with it," and placing his views alongside those who would vote for him, almost like how a presidential candidate will make himself, will take him or herself down off of a pedestal and say, "I understand how you guys are going about doing that, or how I understand what you're feeling." He said, "I know we've all heard the words, deal with it." And then he says, "Well, I'm tired of hearing Taylor say deal with it." And Taylor just kind of takes it. But doing that and then juxtaposing or switching voting and agreeing. He says, "I don't want you to vote for me. I want you to agree with me." It shows that he knows and has paid attention to the peers' feelings with his, and it shows that he paid attention to how other people were feeling, and he wanted to he took in those emotions and those opinions and formulated it on his own, and then captured their attention by using that. And it showed, for a child his age to know how to do that, it shows that it's the social aspect of it. They pay attention. It's not all about content. Sometimes it's picking up on those little nuances. So that's B. And C is kind of a little two parts, because I wasn't exactly sure. There was kind of a battle in my head as to what the question was asking, so I'm going to do both. Determining and rewarding gold stars for citizenship. Immediately in my head, the thing that popped into my head was the instances when the council started calling in everyone and asking their opinions on who should win the gold star. At first, the council decided on themselves. They went into, a little huddle, and they kind of formulated their own opinions, and then it moved into they started calling one person at a time, getting their ideas and all that kind of stuff. And this speaks to my understanding of how children feel toward rewards, and how they should be given in a group, and their understanding of a democratic society, because it's not like they were voting necessarily, but all of their voices were being heard in order to make a decision. Although not all the kids might not know, all of these kids might not know what democracy is, the council still realized that by taking others' opinions into account, they can make a decision that makes others feel as more fair, and they can better gauge what work is being done throughout the town that they may not be seeing, as there are only 4 of the at least 38 kids. Some of the kids went home. Actually, 3 kids went home, so that's at least 37. They were able to take into account all of that, so it's almost like getting a more well-rounded view. And then it goes back into the responsibility factor. They want to make sure that they're making the best decision that they can. And it shows that. So the question might have also been asking who I thought was the most deserving and least deserving to win gold stars. So I just wanted to cover that. This is not what the question is asking, then I guess this is just a little extra. But I just want to make sure that I answer the question in its entirety. The person I would believe out of everyone on here let me see if you can see that, on here would be least deserving is definitely Taylor. I know that's kind of like stereotypical, but I think that she's the least deserving because of the growth I saw as a teacher, a future teacher. I look at how much a student is growing in themselves, growing in their understanding and content understanding and things like that. And it just seemed like Taylor stayed stagnant the entire time. There were instances where she seemed like she was growing, but it usually had a reward attached to it, which says something about a reward and how that should be used. But I think that because she should, it's the scene when the parents come, and she suddenly becomes this like, oh, let's all come together and I'll help and I'll do this and I'll do that. It shows that she's just doing it for show. And at least that's what and had there been a growth aspect, if she would have started off that way but then changed by the end of the series, I think that I would have thought differently. But because there was no growth or drive to grow in that aspect, she would be the least deserving for me. And my most deserving, which might surprise you a little bit, would be Greg. I know there's probably not a lot we could have seen in behind the scenes and things like that, but from where he started to where he began, there was definitely a tremendous amount of growth. He was very egocentrical, he was silly and mean sometimes, and really kind of just cared about himself and having fun with his friends. And even when he had to switch districts, that was still there. He was like, no, you can't take him because he's my friend and I want to have fun on this thing, and it's not really about Bonanza. But once he became a council member, it kind of shifted, and he ended up becoming a tiny mentor to a lot of people. And it was interesting to see him in a leadership position, because I don't think had he been in a leadership position, he wouldn't have felt like he had the responsibility to better others. And even having that responsibility and taking that responsibility himself shows that there was a growth model there. And I just think he has the most growth. Of course, there could have been things behind the scenes where he was acting the same, but from thinking about, people say I don't compliment, and then he sits in the middle and he starts catcalling girls, to really sitting down when he went out to the Indian TP and really like took that to heart, and he was like really reflecting on it. It showed a lot of growth. So I think that he's the most deserving. Then D, so the person considerately making thoughtful choices, like the rewards, punishment, or chickens, things like that. I wrote that the choice to close the arcade, because this is for the group good and the interest of each individual. So the choice to close the arcade each day until the work that's needed to be done in the city is finished, I thought that was very thoughtful. It was very, they had to think about that for a while. At first, the arcade was open to anyone at any time, but the council chose to close it off and then make Sophia the sheriff to make sure that everything else is getting done. And the council had to do that to make sure that the town wouldn't fall apart, just because there was this awesome arcade reward there. So moving into how that spoke to my understanding, it's how it really spoke to how kids view rewards in regards to responsibility. The council who was in charge at the time of when the arcade arrived in Bonanza realized that the arcade was causing a distraction toward the responsibilities people had to keep the town going, making food, cleaning the bathrooms, things like that, and making it clean to live. And it was amazing to see how the 4 council members attributed the decline in productivity to the arcade and acted on that idea to ensure that the town remained in line with the responsibilities that had to be done, so that each individual in the town ate and had clean living conditions. Even more impressive was how they used the arcade as an incentive rather than completely taking it away. Of course, it could have been due to the council members not wanting to just completely take it away, because they wanted to do that too. They wanted to play with it too. But they used it almost like a teacher uses a positive incentive in a classroom. And for them to understand that, it really speaks to how they can understand that as well. And that was powerful. It's really cool. So 1E, the last part of E, was to pick one child I might think would be a bit of a challenge for most teachers and explain what I might focus on to be successful in teaching him or her. Alex. Tiny, cute, little, amazingly intelligent Alex. He may be a challenge for most teachers because of how much he knows. He has such an extensive knowledge, and at such a young age, and having to differentiate for his high-level thinking skills and eclectic interest, because he was interested in everything he came across, might be difficult for some teachers. I honestly have to say it might be a little bit difficult for me getting used to that. But in order to challenge Alex and push him to learn social studies, because it's the question asks to be successful in teaching him or her social studies, I think this is probably going to sound cliche, but I think using an inquiry-based approach that focuses on planning and reflecting would make Alex grasp social studies concepts and feel more compelled to dive into his learning. The example that I would have for that is you can teach. I feel like Alex is one of those students who you can teach how to add money together and subtract money and things like that, but it needs to be concrete for him. He needs to be able to experience it. So one of the things that I did in 5th grade and that I did with my kids this semester, is we had market day, where I have a morning class and an afternoon class, and the morning class were producers, whereas the afternoon class was consumers, and they had currency fluctuating between the two of them. And then in the afternoon they switched. The producers became the consumers, and the consumers the producers, and there was a reflection that went along with it. And each student had to plan out what they were going to make, how it would appeal to a 2nd grade audience. Like those things where there's not a clear, like, this is exactly what you're going to do, but make it your own, just like our MRE project was. That, I think, is where he's going to pull them. A teacher could use the most interest and make him engaged with his learning, and for him to actually get something out of it, instead of just explaining him information and just keep sending him more and more information, like after addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, and things like that. I think those concrete inquiry-based approaches would really help with that. especially with social studies. That's such a abstract thing sometimes, especially when it focuses a lot on the adult world. I think that could really help take curriculum that he's in and take it to a more adult social studies world in his eyes. And then I read, it will be how to use the content in a variety of different ways that will keep them progressing and engaged. Perfect. So that's question number 1. I covered, yes, all my notes say I've covered all that. So question number 2, my final question, it is the 3 things that Zinn highlighted, misconceptions or misunderstandings, and then 2 ways that I might approach teaching such complicated concepts. So my 3 things, and it says it here on the outline, but the first one was Christopher Columbus was a murderer, liar, and an instigator of violent crimes. I didn't necessarily want to use the word rape in a paper, but I had no idea. I knew there was some sketchiness, and he didn't come to the Americas before, like he didn't go straight from where he started to the Americas, but I had no idea he did all of that, and just, it's hard to even think about. Just, I had no idea that he did that. That was my first one. Just to be more specific, when he came to the islands and he raped and pillaged and murdered countless people just to take over the land and their things that they needed for the boat. Like, just, yeah, I had no idea. I read that and I was sitting in my living room and I looked at my roommates and I was like, did either of you have any idea? And they were like, no, I didn't have any idea. So. The second one was Lincoln didn't sign the Emancipation Proclamation to free the slaves, but rather to keep the South and the North together as one nation instead of them being divided. I wasn't shocked to hear that, but I was more shocked to realize that wasn't really what happened, because I always, growing up, especially in Prince George's County, where Lincoln was held at such a high pedestal because he signed it to free the slaves. But ever since I read that chapter and understood the mindsets of the people at the time, it really didn't surprise me that there was a different reason. But I had no idea that was the reason at all. So that was really cool to hear, actually, because it's not one that's like people died and there was like slavery and stuff. But it was one of those things where it was like, wow, there really was another reason that not very many people talk about. And before I say how I would teach that, my last one, and this is the reason there's asterisks on here, is because this is one of the chapters I read for my strategy demo. One of them is from, let's make sure I can actually use one of those. One of them was from those chapters, piece of asterisk. Yeah, okay, so it's good. So Andrew Jackson, treating American Indians like they were below even the smallest of animals. I tried to word it a little bit better than just saying he was a bad guy. He basically just treated Indians like dogs, American Indians like dogs, and it was even less than dogs, because he didn't even treat them like people. He took away the land that their great grand family had even helped create, and just simply for westward expansion. It's just awful. And he took land, made the thing that hit me the most on that was the promises he broke, and knew he was going to break them when he made them, and using the military at his disposal even when they didn't believe in what he was doing. I'm glad I had that chapter for my strategy demo, because it was a really eye-opening experience, realizing how we had made it from the East Coast to California. I just had no idea, which is why I love this book so much. I'm hoping that I can have a class that I can use this book in, because it just frames it so well. It is graphic, but it frames it so well. And I can, when I talk about what I'm gonna do for 2 of those things that surprised me, the book really helps set the tone, just like my Jim Henson books that help me set the tone to write the messy entries for my quilt. But the first one that I want to talk about that I could for something that I might use to approach teaching such a complicated topic, for Lincoln not signing the Emancipation Proclamation to free the slaves, but rather to keep the South and North together. To approach teaching this complicated topic, I might dress up as Abraham Lincoln and write or deliver a speech on the creation and signing of the Emancipation Proclamation that details his reasoning behind him signing it. I like the idea of dressing up. I think any grade likes that, especially if you can hold your character, which I think I'm really good at. And I think it really brings a different twist onto social studies. That's not just read a chapter, answer the questions at the end of the chapter. Like, I just think it's really cool, and it helps for higher order thinking. So it says that I have to be able to teach this with primary and intermediate or upper level students, so that speech can be written at a primary or intermediate level to match the conceptual understandings of the students, or to match the vocabulary, or use the vocabulary that we're discussing at whichever level we might be discussing this at. So after the speech is delivered, the class can work together to highlight his reasoning for signing the Emancipation Proclamation. Like, I would say goodbye, presidential wave, leave, undress, come back in. I might even just be taking off a beard and a hat and a quick blazer, but coming back in and then talking about it. And this brings the topic to life through acting, and I can show that Lincoln was still a great guy who possessed the ideals of the time, though a bit more progressive than those around him. Like, I want to personify that he wasn't a bad man. I don't think any president is necessarily awful. It just shows that he had another agenda for signing the Emancipation Proclamation, and it's nice for students to be knowledgeable about that. And I thought that dressing up would be a really cool way to do that. And I love writing. Like, I could write a speech, and I think that I could weave in a lot of information and stuff, so I think that would be a lot of fun for me and for the students. And the last one that last strategy I would use addresses the Andrew Jackson surprise that I was talking about before. To approach teaching this complicated topic, I might write journal entries of an American Indian at the time detailing the events that Andrew Jackson caused. And to make it more realistic or authentic, I might age the paper with tea. I love the way those come out. And a lot of times my handwriting looks like chicken scratch anyways, so I might be able to just write it at a moderate speed for me, and it might look kind of like you're writing with a utensil that's not necessarily the best pencil in the world. The journal entries can be differentiated to the primary and intermediate levels by including or not including some of the tougher portions of the time period. So for the primary students, I might not want to detail how Andrew Jackson killed 800 people in 1814 in one of the first battles, and instead focus on his lying, which can be used to show how lying can make others feel unhappy and unsafe. It might go against a contract you've made. Just making those connections anywhere you can for with the primary grades really helps them. And I think that just focusing on the less death-related topics for them would work. And for the intermediate students, tapping into more and more emotional, like writing journal entries that have more emotion attached to them, like detailing the conditions and what somebody might feel like walking and being a part of the Trail of Tears. This way I can use my love of writing and show students awesome ways to express what they know, just like we did with the MRE. And before I backtrack off of that, I thought that, I feel like these things take a lot of preparation, and even though I'm going to be able to use them year after year and I might have to tweak them a little bit, I think that because I like to write, I can express it in a way that really showcases it. The Jim Henson project really gave me confidence in being able to do that, and I think that future students could get a lot out of it. And so yeah, I thought that the journal entries, you can break them into the groups and have each group work together to analyze them. What are the conditions? What might you be thinking? Not just necessarily give them how the person was thinking. I think that would be really concrete for them, and it would be kind of cool, especially if I took it out, not a manila envelope, but took it out as something that looked aged, maybe a satchel or something like that. So that'd be really neat. So that was the end of question number 2 and 1. So that's the conclusion of my final. But I did, in my last notes, it occurred to me while I was writing this outline and thinking about what I was going to say, that the MRE project and the strategy demos gave us an enormous catalog of projects and ideas we can use in social studies lessons. I knew the strategy demos would do that, but the MRE project and seeing what everybody else did, that's where I got the aging the paper and writing journal entries. I never would have thought about that before, and I loved how each of the projects I loved each of the projects, but it had not occurred to me while I was making the project and watching them that some of the projects did for the MRE projects could be used to bring social studies to life, just like it did with us. Doing the quilt, that brought it to life. It allowed me to write. It allowed me to feel what Jim Henson was like from different perspectives. just O in the box. I really got a really good grasp of temporal grandin on that. And the second question, the question 2 of the final, just brought everything together full circle for me, and it opened my eyes to how I can replicate my engaging experience in your class with my future students. It was just a lot of fun. I really felt engaged this semester, and I'm glad that the second question was put on the final, because it really just put it all together in one look. For me, it just made it all click in my head. And I think that I'm going to make social studies a really great experience for my kids, and I cannot wait to teach social studies, because it's one of those things that you really can truly bring to life. And thanks for everything. That's it. That's my final. Thanks, Paul.